Good evening, delegates. Welcome to the second orientation program that we have organized for you. This one's for the Churchill's War Ministry. I'm glad that the first orientation program was quite a bit of a success, and things started working quite well. So in that sense, we're very happy that this new innovative step is actually working. I know there were some glitches in the middle. So I would like to advise you to do something. If your video is not coming perfectly in perfectly proper order, what you can do is you can change the resolution to 240p or 144p. That way you can hear whatever the chairperson is saying. You don't necessarily have to see the video if that is the problem. In any case, please remember, the only problem last time was that the questions which were coming in took a bit of time to come in. So what you can do is you can send in the questions as soon as you hear, and they will appear in the comments. And we have each and every member of the executive board to look into these comments and then inform the chair. So she will always get back to you once she receives the questions. Moreover, if you have missed this live feed, you can always go back and watch it whenever you have the time. With this, I'd like to begin this orientation program. The chairperson for the Churchill's War Ministry is Shanika Bhomik. She will come, she will introduce the committee to you, and she will talk about the various procedures and some special features of the committee which sets it apart from the others. Also, please remember that any question which needs to be answered within the scheduled time of this conference, the ending time is 5:15. Within that time, if you want it to be answered through video, you have to ask within that time. Otherwise, whatever question comes in, we can only send it to you through email or through other methods of contact that you have sent us. With this, I would like to begin this orientation program. Shanika, you may have the floor or the laptop.
Thank you, Chairperson, sir. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shanika Bhomik, and I will be chairing this committee, the Churchill War Ministry. Before I begin, I would like to introduce my board to you. My director, Roshni Chakraborty, my assistant director, Arachaka Brahmachari, and the rapporteur for this committee is Sahili Chatterjee. Now, this committee is set on the 13th day of May, 1940. Plan on having is tackling the Second World War, right? So it's a constant crisis committee. As a part of the specialized committee, we will have updates and crises one after the other. However, we will begin with the general speakers list. And in case we have an update in the beginning, we will start off with a special speakers list. Now, the general speakers list, it depends on the delegates, the discretion of the delegates. They can choose to speak for a minute, half a minute, or 2 minutes, but the board will suggest to keep it to 1 to 1.5 minutes. After the general speakers list, we will move on to formal procedure in committee. We will follow the standard procedure. However, this ministry, the War Ministry, will introduce a new concept of a roundtable conference. In case of an emergency, we might have each and every delegate. The strength of this committee will be 25 delegates, and we might have these delegates to comment on the crisis. So when we move into a roundtable conference, each of the delegates have to speak for a stipulated period of time. Other than that, I will be holding the post of Mr. Churchill himself. However, I will not take part in the deliberations or the discussion. So I will just be moderating as your chair. In case we have a decision which needs to be taken, I will step in as Prime Minister, and all ultimate decisions will be taken by the Prime Minister. However, I will not be a part of the committee discussion itself, and I will not be commenting, or I will not pass any sort of judgment as the Prime Minister or the Premier. Another thing we have to realize is that in this committee, we will not have any time jumps. So it won't be like we are in 1940 and then we move on to 1942 or anything of that sort. We will not have time jumps. What we will, however, do is have accelerated time frames. So in case of accelerated time frames, we might have an action order pass and then we might implement it. So that's an accelerated time frame where we are implementing things much faster than it actually happens in the real life. But we will, however, not have time jumps. So delegates are requested to note that. Also, I want delegates to realize that the paperwork for this committee will not include resolutions. We will have directives, and on the final day, we will have a directive which will be in the format of implementation of operative clauses and or just operative clauses. We will not have preambulatory clauses. Now, the directive will be almost like an action order. Also, all working papers in this committee will be called action orders. So we will not have any working paper, but action orders. And if the action order is passed in committee, then it will be naturally implemented in the outside world. Delegates are also requested to note about the communiques. So we have two types of communiques, one public, the other private communiques. In public communiques, what we do is all ministers are requested to address someone who is a subordinate in the ministerial cabinet and who the minister can ask to carry out a particular action. That is when you send a communique outside. It's a private communique or a public communique. In case of a public communique, the entire committee will be aware of the action that is being taken. And in case of a private communique, only the particular delegate and the executive board member will be aware of it. However, delegates, please note that if one does send in a communique, it is the discretion of the executive board members to pass that communique. So it is not necessary that we will pass the communique. It might or might not pass. Other than that, we do not need any press releases in this committee. You must realize that everyone who's a part of this cabinet is someone who holds some gravity in the whole of the United Kingdom. Therefore, there's no need of press updates or press releases. If there is any delegate who wants to declare something, he can come up and deliver a speech and we will give him the time. But however, press releases are not necessary. Also, delegates, please note that when we are talking about communiques, we do not want it to be a result of something. So a communique should not say that it has, suppose a German invasion has taken place or something of that sort. So it cannot be a result of anything. You can just say that you're implementing an action or you're trying to find out information. For example, the chief of the MI6 might want to implement something or he might want to look into certain documents. So all of that is fine, but you cannot come up with updates of your own in the form of communiques. That is for the executive board member. Other than that, delegates, if there are any questions, do please post your questions because I would like to answer them. Other than that, I think we have addressed the fact that paperwork. So I hope it's clear with paperwork. We have communiques, private and public. We have action orders in the form of working papers, basically, and we will have a directive on the final day. Or we might also have a directive addressing the crisis, the main crisis, and at hand. That's about it. Other than that, I would like to talk to you about the individual portfolios. Since there are 25 members attending this conference, we will try and follow a formal procedure. We will have time bounds and every delegate is supposed to speak in the stipulated time period. But however, in case of an emergency, certain delegates might be allowed to speak for longer hours, longer minutes, if at all it's needed, because we might have updates on particular delegates on particular portfolios. So in that case, we will allow the delegate to take longer time. There is a question, so I will now address it. Will joint communiques be accepted or will they have to be addressed only to our respective ministries? Well, joint communiques will be accepted in committee. However, like I mentioned, it depends on what exactly is taking place in the committee at that point of time. If we see that that communique is pertinent to the issue or the crisis at hand and it aids the crisis in some way or the other, only then will the executive board members or Prime Minister himself accept the communique. So in that case, delegates are in fact requested to join together and come together and come up with communiques. However, it is in the discretion of the executive board members to whether or not to accept the communiques. So I hope that is clear. Any other questions? Okay, so moving on, like I was discussing about the committee, all the ministers here are very important. So it is advisable if every single delegate speaks. When we are talking about research, I do understand it's a constant crisis committee. I've been for quite a few of them. And in constant crisis committees, people say that the research goes out of the window. But in this crisis, since it's a historic constant crisis committee, we will definitely change the course of history. However, delegates should keep in mind basic facts. They should not come up with too many out-of-the-box updates or forms or blocks or anything of that sort. We will look into things which are out of the box to an extent, but definitely not something which could have never happened in the past. we are recreating history, but at the same time we will keep in mind our basic facts and will be grounded, right? So having said that, I expect all the delegates to be well versed with the study guide, especially the portfolio matrix, so that you don't go wrong on your policies. And thirdly, please do research on your own, because it is not just the updates that you have to build on or work on. It's not that we'll be looking forward to. We'll also be looking forward to your facts and how you present your facts. There's been another question. The question being, can unilateral action be taken through communiques? Yes, we will accept that unilateral action can be taken through communiques, but then again, it depends on how the committee proceeds. So, in a particular point of time, if it's required, and if a minister has come up, or a ministry in its entirety has come up with a very good communique, then action order will be taken into consideration, and that might be implemented. However, when you are sending a communique, do specify and mention whether it's a public or a private communique. Only then can the board address the communique. Delegates are also expected to know that we will not have points of order, but we will have them addressed in chits. So if you have a point of order on a particular speech, delegate's speech, then you are supposed to write it in a chit and send it to the executive board members, and the board members will then let you know whether it has been noted or not, whether it stands. But however, we will not entertain delegates disrupting committee or particular speeches in the middle by standing up for points of orders. The other 3 points are points of information. Now we will have points of information on general speakers list, on the general speakers list, or the special speakers list, which is an alternative to the general speakers list in case of an emergency. However, we will not have points of information during the moderated caucuses. That time we will have an uninterrupted session of time period 10 to 15 minutes, and we will just have delegates delivering speeches and not questions entertained on those speeches. At particular points of time, the board might look favorably upon asking questions, so we might ask questions to individual delegates. However, I don't think that will happen. So it's fine if the executive board member is asking a question, but probably we won't. So in that case, it's upon the delegate's discretion whether he or she wants to entertain that question addressed by the executive board. Other than that, we will have the points of information through questions. What are the other 2 points? It's points of information, parliamentary inquiry. We will have parliamentary inquiry and personal privilege, right? So personal privilege, you can use it to your discretion. And points of parliamentary inquiry can interrupt a delegate speech, but I suggest that you keep your points of parliamentary inquiry after a delegate speech, and once the delegate has spoken, and once the speech is done, you can come up with your points. Also, delegates, there are 3 kinds of yields. So if your time period is, if an individual time is for about 1 minute and you have to yield the remaining 10 seconds, then you can yield it to the chair. So it's upon the chair's discretion what she would like to do with the remaining time. You can yield it to points of information. However, during a moderated caucus, you cannot. If your speech is over, you sit down and you do not yield your time. So in case of a moderated caucus, what we will do is that we will have, if there is time remaining, we will just let it pass, and then we'll have the delegate sit down. But during general speakers list, we will have the yields, and the delegate can choose to yield it to another delegate as well. So the 3 yields would be points yield to point of information, yield it to the chair, or yield it to another delegate, where another delegate can use that 10 seconds to deliver a speech or clarify a policy or a statement. Also, delegates, at times, if a particular ministry or minister has carried out an action or a plan and it has come to the board's notice, then the board might ask that ministry or that minister representing that ministry in a committee to come up to the podium and justify himself. He will be given a maximum of 5 to 10 minutes before, and after that he has to come up to the podium and state what his plans are, why he has based certain action of his, and that is how he has to explain to the entire committee and the executive board members how and why he has done a certain act or committed a certain act. So that's about it. And do we have any other questions? I think there's another question about paperwork. So since I would like to further elaborate on the paperwork, because I think it will be easier for the delegates to understand. since it's a constant crisis committee, we will not like to waste too much of time on paperwork. We will be emphasizing on discussion on particular issues, right? So when it comes to paperwork, we want the delegates to definitely come up with all of that, but also with paperwork comes lobbying, right? So the delegates are requested to in fact come up with paperwork at times to address particular crises, so that we can understand their lobbying skills and how the blocks are being developed in committee. But however, paperwork, if it does not pass, it's fine, it can be incorporated in the final directive or it can be let go. It won't really hold too much of a gravity in committee if or if not the paperworks are passed. However, action orders again are very important. So the delegates are asked to keep that in mind.
There's a question on paperwork.
Right.
First
What sort of paperwork are we looking forward to on the third day? Right, I think I've already addressed this, but since the delegates are not yet clear on this, I will again go back to this. We will not have a resolution in committee. Having said that, we will have directives in committee. So in order to promote a directive, you have to lobby, and there will be 3 authors in the directive, and we will not have any signatories. So once whichever paperwork addresses the board first will be the one which will be read out in committee, and then if we have more than one directive, then we will ask the committee to vote and decide on which paperwork to be read or introduced in committee first. After the introduction, we will move into discussion either through 2 for 2 against or 3 for 3 against, or a question answer session with the authors. And after, or we can have a moderated caucus on the paperwork. And finally, we will move into voting. We can either discuss both the paperwork simultaneously, or we can discuss one, move into voting, and then discuss the next one. So I hope the paperwork doubt has been clarified. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. So, right. So I have received another question which asks me what is the criteria for an award and how one can stand out in committee. Well, delegates, you are coming to the war ministry, and to stand out, you have to really come up with your diplomatic skills and put them in the forefront. What you have to realize is that in a constant crisis committee, I expect each of the delegates to be a winner in themselves. I expect all of you to be very well versed with constant crisis committees and how to go about the committee. So when it comes to this particular question, how to stand out in committee, I think you can be very entertaining in the entertaining motion. But other than that, it's important that you speak often and you come up with important points, solutions, or rather action plans. Initially, we'll be looking for action plans, how to proceed in the war. And after that, we can move on to how to come out, counter certain updates or maybe even solutions.
the second question is what are action orders?
What are action orders, right? So action orders are like, it's a supplementary to working papers. So in our committee, instead of having working papers, we will call them action orders. Now action orders do not need to follow a particular set pattern of address. So you don't have to write it in with in particular directives or clauses or any in a particular format. What you have to do is just write maybe 5 to 6 points as to these are the actions that are to be taken by a particular minister or a group of ministers or the war ministry at large, and why you want to take it. So you can justify it in just 2 or 3 lines. If the board deems it fit, then we will ask the authors to come up to the podium and then finally justify as to what they are planning to do through the course of the action order. Also, we might have certain updates on which you will have moderated caucuses. Once the moderated caucuses are over, after the intensive discussion on a particular update, what we look forward to is probably an action order. That is to understand how to go through or how the committee wants to proceed in time and deal with the crisis or the update. The second question.
The next question is, will the MI6 agent for the Minister of Information be the only ones responsible for providing information?
Right. This question, will the MI6 agent or the Minister of Information be the only one responsible for providing information? No, delegates, that is not true. As a matter of fact, in fact, the only authentic information which you can hold in committee will be the ones provided by the executive board members. So if a particular minister, including the Minister of Information or the MI6 agent or any other minister, comes up with a particular set pattern of rules or regulations or any information they have derived, then it is upon the committee's discretion to decide whether they want to believe in that provided information or not, because the board will not be held liable for that information provided. Only the information coming through the board is the one which is authentic and which can be trusted. The rest, delegates are definitely requested, or they can come up with their own set of rules and regulations and information that they have derived, or any form of update. But then again, it's upon the committee's discretion whether they want to believe in it or not, and whether they want to act on the particular update provided by a certain delegate, because then again, it's not going to be held against the executive board members.
Next is, as the king is the head of state in England, would his representative and his council have to last say?
Thank you for that question. In fact, I would be addressing this question myself. As the king of and the as the king is the head of the state in England, would the representative and his council have the last say? Right. That will not be so. The reason why this committee is called the Churchill War Ministry is because it's a war ministry, and in a war ministry, the prime minister will have the utmost say. Of course, the monarch has to sign in the action orders which are passed through this council. Right. So once the prime minister and the entire of the committee passes a particular paperwork, the monarch's signature has to be there on the particular paperwork, but at the same time his say will be valued. However, it won't be binding and it won't be the deciding factor. We will have the prime minister decide, and once the prime minister decides on a particular action, it will be implemented, but the monarch will have the last say. However, the monarch's say should be affirmative if the entire ministry and the prime minister is planning to go into war or wage war or go into defense or offense. So that way the monarch will hopefully side with the ministry, his war ministry, the British war ministry. With that, we'll move on to the next question.
Alright, so is the format for the action order same as working papers?
Where is it? Is the format of the action order the same as that of a working paper? Yes, that is so. We will have the working paper. The format of the action order will be similar to a working paper. However, in a working paper, you suggest a certain action to be taken. In an action order, you will tell the committee as to what action you want to take, and then in 1 or 2 lines, you will justify why you want to take that action. For example, if you want to bomb a certain place, or if you want to send traffic arms from one place in UK to the other, you will have to write it down that this minister would like to do so, or this minister would like to ask this particular other minister about this action that she or he wants to take, and then you have to justify what you're planning to take in 1 or 2 lines.
What page are
Hey, this is a very interesting question. At what pace shall we be receiving updates? It depends on the pace in which committee will be running, and that again depends on the delegates. So if the delegates start deciding, just 1 second, delegates. Yeah, so if the delegates start taking forward this committee in a very accelerated format, if they do solve crises one after the other, then the board will be glad to provide with more updates. We do have a lot of interesting updates in store for you. So we will be looking forward to delegates who can think on their feet and improvise on particular updates and come up with solutions on them. And once that is done, we will move on to the next update. It also might happen that while an update is going on and while the committee is moving towards a particular decision that they are about to take or action that they are about to implement, it might so happen that another update might be introduced. And in that case, the delegates are expected to address both the updates in their speeches, in the forthcoming speeches. So the pace at which updates will be thrown at the delegates will obviously depend on how the delegates work on these updates and how they can wrap themselves around the updates and improvise on them. Also, another thing is that the agenda for this committee is course of British action in the Second World War. However, there's a sub-agenda to it, and that is the colonies, right? So at that point of time, British had a lot of colonies, not only just in India, but also in the Middle East with the Mandate of Palestine and the White Paper and all these documents which were sent from the League of Nations and which gave the British government right to rule over in the Middle East. Now, also as a part of the war ministry, you have to realize that this is a world war, and it not just involves the entire of Europe, but as the whole war in itself, the whole world in itself. I beg your pardon. So, having said that, obviously India being one of the major colonies of the British at that period, British Empire at that period of time, and not just India, also Palestine and all the Middle Eastern regions in Africa. All of them are a part of the African colony, which is under the British mandate. So what we have to see is that we address these problems as well. This is particularly because all these colonies will also affect the war or the way in which Britain tackles the war. So the board will be looking forward, and especially chair and Churchill himself will be looking forward to the solutions regarding these colonies and how to tackle about emergencies coming in these particular colonies. So it might so happen that we have emergencies not in our home ground but far across the continent, across the globe, and you might have to implement certain actions regarding all these colonies as well. For example, India, with all the Indian nationalist movement coming up and the Indian leaders going against the British crown, that might be a major important part which the board in fact wants to address. So the board will be looking forward to solutions and suggestions on how to tackle about crises set in any of these regions and basically the colonies. Do we have another question? So I would be looking forward to more questions. If there is any delegate who has any doubt regarding how to go about committee or the procedure, they are free to contact me personally through Facebook or email. I hope that, okay, this is regarding the position papers. So a lot of delegates had asked me a question that in a constant crisis committee, we usually do not have position papers. So why would we in the Churchill War Ministry send in position papers? I completely agree with you, delegates. And being a person who usually prefers to go for constant crisis committees, I myself have written very few position papers. However, it is a necessity in LMCMUN to write position papers for the simple reason because it acts as a tiebreaker in case of an award. So someone earlier had asked me what is the criteria for awards, and this is something important because other than if all the delegates will be speaking, all of them will be coming up with paperwork, right? So as the board members, it becomes very difficult to choose one particular delegate who is actually standing out in committee or to set him apart. So what would be the deciding factor in those cases would be the position paper, and therefore I urge every single delegate who still haven't sent in their position papers to in fact send in their position papers at the earliest. I will be replying to most of the position papers. I will be going through them this evening and replying to them. So if you haven't got back your reply, don't worry, we will be going through your position papers. But this is why I'm telling you how it's imperative for you to write a position paper. And in the position paper in itself, what you must do is that you have to address the problem, solutions which your ministry would like to suggest in the British War Cabinet. It is important for you to provide us with a purview of what you bring to the table when it comes to debating. So it is basically a pre-runner, a precursor, where we understand how the delegate is about to go about in committee. So it is very important that you do send in your position paper and address the problem. There is the Second World War. I won't be looking forward to solutions just yet or right now, for the simple reason because we are in the midst of war and we don't know how it's going to proceed. But what is imperative is how you want to go about this war, and therefore instead of solutions, you can come up with suggestions related to your portfolio as to how you want to take action and how you want actions to be implemented in the further future. Okay, we've received a question what a special speakers list is. Delegates understand that here we are using a few very fancy terms because it's a specialized committee and it's crisis oriented. At the same time, we will be following the formal standard H1 procedure. So a special speakers list is just like a general speakers list, except a special speakers list is used in times of crises. So when an emergency is launched or an update is launched, a delegate might want to move into a special speakers list instead of discussing it through moderated caucuses. There you deliver a speech which is almost similar and equivalent to a general speakers list, and if it passes with the discretion of the executive board members or with the voting in committee, then naturally we will move into a special speakers list where each one of them, the delegates will be recognized and then they can speak as and when they have been recognized. There's another question, and it be
After a delegate is given in the committee, will the portfolios be switched from portfolio killing the war ministry?
Okay, thank you for this question. In fact, we were looking forward to killing a few people in committee since it's a war ministry. So a particular delegate has sent in a question asking, after a delegate is killed in the committee, will the portfolios be switched to another portfolio in the war ministry? Of course, delegate, we will not have you killed on the first day and have you in committee in the capacity of nobody important for the next 2 days of committee, right? So having said that, we will definitely ensure that you will be given allotted another portfolio, and you will be provided maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes to research on that particular portfolio. Don't worry, it won't be too much out of the box. So it will be a particular portfolio which another person in committee can handle. So definitely, if someone has been killed off, then he will receive another portfolio in committee, and then he can work in committee following his new set of policies. This is again something very important. I want delegates to note that breach of policy will be severely penalized in this committee. You have to stick to who the person actually was and how the person actually propagated and promulgated his ideologies. So you cannot act on your own. You must act on the principles and the guidelines provided in the portfolio matrix, for the simple reason because we want this committee to be as realistic as possible. So we want the delegates to come up with to follow their policies and come up with updates and crises and discussion and solutions, everything related to the portfolio in itself, and not anything too much out of the box. So please do not try and breach your foreign policies, or especially your policy towards a particular update or crisis, because that will be severely penalized.
There's a follow-up.
Okay, there's a follow-up question.
Will the royal family have any hand in this? Will the representative of the royal family be present? I think the first half can be ignored, but then will the representative of the royal family be present?
Will the royal family have any hand in this? As a matter of fact, this is the war ministry, so the royal family does not really need to come up with their own views. Of course, the monarch will be consulted, but it's not required for the royal family to get involved. And also, more importantly, the royal family will be informed of all the proceedings. The Privy Seal portfolio will be present in committee. Now, the Privy Seal is a part of the monarch, is a representative of the monarch in the war ministry. So he will have a say, he will have a vote. But at the same time, the monarch in itself, it is an institutional post, it's a nominal post. So all decisions will be taken by the minister, prime minister himself, and the prime minister's decisions will be swayed by the committee at large. So every single minister has to contribute into the final plan or the final action, which then will be passed by the prime minister. So the monarch, of course, has a deciding role in it, but he himself will not be the final binding power to decide or judge whether a particular action will be taken or not. And that is exactly why we are calling it the war ministry, where the ministerial posts and the ministers who will be a part of this committee will have the final and ultimate say. Do we have another question?
Yes. Please clarify the time frame of committee.
Please clarify the time frame of committee. Okay, thank you. Delegates, also you're requested to please refer to the study guide. We start on the 13th of May, which is the third day of Mr. Churchill coming to power in 1940. You have to realize that till this point of time, we had the phony war, which is after Hitler decided to invade Poland and after Britain and France declared war on Germany. There came a period of time during the winter season when Hitler did not exactly carry any action plan. So from the time of September to about April, Hitler did not really take any action. So after the phony war, we have come back to power. We have come back to this ministry. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. So in this ministry, there has been a change of power, and Mr. Churchill has recently been elected, and therefore there might be certain repercussions in the home ground. There might be certain changes in policies. Therefore, this is where we start. However, we might end up at any point of time in history. Like I said, we won't have time jumps, so we will move at a gradual pace. We won't be moving from 1940 to 1942 directly. We will have time jumps in probably months or weeks or something of that sort, and we will have accelerated time frame in the sense that we will implement orders faster. But at the same time, we will not move into 1940 or from 1940 to 1945 at one go. So delegates are requested to keep that in mind.
There are two-part question again. First part being, shall we have an entertaining motion? And second, on a more serious note, does the Deputy Prime Minister enter special powers in committee?
Okay, so
I don't think the first part is
yeah, motion to entertainment. I am not sure. And the second part
does
says,
the Deputy Prime Minister
does it? Yeah, so the Deputy Prime Minister in committee will play the role of his ministerial role. So he will not enjoy any special powers as such. As Prime Minister, I myself won't be intervening in committee too much, but the Deputy Prime Minister will definitely have a say. He will have his voting rights, but at the same time, he's just requested to keep all his speeches in the sense of in the form of solutions, and he will not be enjoying any special powers. I'm sorry, Deputy Prime Minister. Also, delegates, everyone in this committee, all the 25 members, will have a vote in committee. We also have two special people attending this conference in the War Ministry, one being the ambassador to France and one being the ambassador to USA. As at this point of time, it is strategically important for us to strengthen our ties. We will have these delegates in committee whose opinions will be valued, and we will be looking forward to what they have to offer in the debate that is to take place. And they will also be getting their votes. So every single member, excluding the Prime Minister himself, will have votes in committee on all paperworks and in the formal procedure. Also, there are two kinds of voting, one being a formal vote and one being an informal vote. When we move into informal vote, we'll have it during when we have to move into a moderated caucus or anything of that sort. So in case of an informal vote, the committee, everyone, when there's a motion for the voting to proceed, then either you vote for it or you vote against it. But however, in case of a paperwork that has to be passed in committee, it has to go through a procedure of formal vote where every minister his name will be called out, and when he is being addressed to, he has to cast his vote either for or against a particular paperwork. And after having taken down the votes, we will see if there is a 2/3 majority in committee, then we will move into passing that paperwork. However, if there isn't a majority in committee, even a simple majority, then naturally the paperwork will fail. Think we have another question. So
considering that this is a constant crisis committee, how important will research be?
right, I think I've addressed this earlier. Research is of utmost importance because we are an historic committee set in history. So it is important to know your facts. It is very important to revolve your present decisions in 1940 based around the facts and based around the information and the history that you gather. So research is of utmost importance. However, we will not be looking forward to delegates who rant off facts in committee. Naturally, you have to come up and improvise on the updates given, think on your feet and come up with new solutions and suggestions and action orders. But at the same time, like I've mentioned, it is very important for you to go through the research and to ensure that your research is in place, for the simple reason that every speech that you make has to be grounded somewhere in the past. So it has to be because of certain incidents that have taken place. Also, delegates, please note that any thing that has happened, any incident that has taken place, whether it's any form of war or action that has been taken after 13th May 1940, will not be held justified in committee. So any of these actions will not be something which we are holding in committee. It does not stand. So we are in 1940, the 13th day of May, and from there we take committee forward. So from there, nothing has taken place and nothing has proceeded in the course of committee. And in the Second World War in itself, nothing exactly has taken place. So what we will look forward to is moving ahead in time from the 13th day of May. So delegates are requested to not refer to any incident that has taken place after the 13th of May, for the simple reason that we will not be knowing any of that. For the simple reason we will be grounded on the 13th. Delegates, I hope this online orientation is helping most of you to understand how the committee will work. It's a constant crisis committee. It is fast-paced. However, it's historic. So there are certain facts you have to keep in mind. It is important that you understand paperwork. It is important that you keep your research in mind while coming up with solutions. And there are 25 delegates, so most of you will be recognized. I hope there won't be any recognizing problems. So at this point of time, I would like to sign off. If there is any other question you will want the chairperson to entertain, then definitely send in through Facebook or email. You can ask the other board members as well. And I look forward to meeting you at the end of this weekend. Thank you.
To the delegates, you still have about 17 minutes left to send in your questions if you want it to be answered through the video itself. So please by 5:15, post any questions as comments or any other query that you might have. Post it as a comment on this video itself if you want Shanika to answer it on this video. So we'll be taking a break right now. If you think that if you are unable to do so, if you are not able to give the comment within 5:15, don't worry. Send it to Shanika's committee email ID or post it on the Facebook page. They will definitely get back to you through email, through the Facebook page. But remember, if you want it on the video, you have to post it before 5:15. So delegates, with that, we'd like to sign off. We'll come back again at the end of this video. If we have any more questions to answer, we'll answer it then. Right? Thank you.
So welcome back, delegates. Since there aren't any questions further here, I will like to introduce my board once again. This is your director, Roshni Chakraborty, your rapporteur, Saheli Chatterjee, and your assistant director, Aratrika Brahmachari. Okay. So delegates, this is the first informal session of LMCMUN in itself. The 3 days of committee will begin from Saturday. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you understood what this committee is all about and how to go about this committee. Since this was an informal session, I would still ask the delegates if they have any question, any query regarding anything at all about this committee, to please address it to either of the board members. We are very approachable people, and we are very excited to host you at the end of this weekend. It will be our pleasure, and we will try and make this committee as enthralling and as enriching as it is going to be for us. It is a learning process for both sides, and we will be learning a lot as the delegates have a lot to offer in committee. So we will be signing off at this point of time. It is important for the delegates to also keep in mind before they come for this committee to come up with potential good research. All of you have a lot of, I'm sorry for the distraction. Anyway, board members, why don't you come in front of the frame? So, yeah, thank you. So, do you have anything to say? Yeah, I'll move back. Is there anything you want to address to the delegates?
Okay, delegates, best of luck. Please come well researched. Make sure you come up with concrete solutions. It is a war ministry, so we will be judging you on your course of action in the war. So just keep in mind that the most important thing is solutions.
And your rapporteur, Saheli Chatterjee.
We're looking forward to 3 days of absolutely brilliant learning experience, and wishing you all the best, all of you. And we're looking forward to a brilliant 3 days experience.
Right, and your assistant director.
Best of luck, delegates. Please do your best in this committee.
Right, and we also have the group on Facebook. So in case you want to lobby, or in case you want to just get to know each other better, please utilize the Facebook group to the fullest. And in case you want to interact with anyone, any delegates, or any query you want to bring to the floor, any form of updates you would want in committee, please address and do so with the use of the Facebook group. With that, we would like to sign off. See you in this weekend. Thank you.